And so I just was wondering if you could talk about, your journey a little bit and what drew you to Bharatanatyam specifically.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for having me. My goodness, just hearing about who the next guest speaker is going to be and how he's a senior devotee, one of the initial Prabhupada disciples, I became so humbled in this moment because I thought, oh my gosh, I just feel so fortunate to be here and to know that I'm in the company of wonderful devotees. So thank you so much for having me. Um, I mean, it's funny because when you say about my dedication or the depth in the arts, personally, I feel like I'm like just beginning to scratch the surface, and that's having been studying dance my whole life. But that's the nature of it, especially classical arts. I feel like classical arts in particular, it's being initiated into like a bona fide sampradaya when you're studying classical art, because it contains the depth of centuries of knowledge and wisdom being passed down from guru to shishya. And Bharatanatyam goes all the way back to the Vedas, and there's it's it contains so much depth and so much spirituality, so much wisdom. So I always feel like I'm barely just taking one drop from the ocean, but in that drop itself, I'm able to completely lose myself within it. So I I have been learning Bharatanatyam my whole life, but I feel like, yeah, I reflect over the past few months, and I think, okay, maybe like 2 months ago, I actually started getting serious. But I've thought that way for years. I'm only now getting serious. But how did I get introduced to it? Was, I mean, it was beyond me. It was from before my time, because my mother, she joined the temple in Laguna, and then she was serving in Los Angeles, and she heard a concert of a Carnatic vocalist come to the temple. It was actually Vijay Subramaniam. And after that concert, she decided that she wanted to learn. And she went to Vijay's house, and she was asked the question, do you want to learn North Indian or South Indian classical music? And my mother didn't know the difference. She was, I think she was about 18 years old, a young devotee, and new to Indian classical arts. And so she said, I don't know, you tell me. And then her teacher said, well, South Indian classical music is the one that is accompanied by Bharatanatyam. And so my mom said, oh yeah, that, because she had seen a dancer once before. So because my mom became introduced to South Indian classical music, and then my father was also interested in Indian classical arts, I grew up around it. My mother was always singing in the house. We were always hearing tapes and records of classical musicians. And then my sister, who's 12 years older than me, she started learning first, and then she was my teacher. So I don't know how it started. I like to think it's a past life connection.
Yeah, I think honestly it might be, I feel like anything, especially whenever we feel like an instant connection to an expression of devotion, like I feel like that's definitely coming in. And just hearing, the background, I didn't know about any of that. And that's awesome. It changes when everyone around you is, you know, culturally like aware, your entire experience kind of shifts. So going off of that, how do you feel like knowing more about art or being very enthusiastic about that expression of devotion has helped you in your devotional life and your devotional journey?
Hmm. I like that question. I feel like my spiritual life and my dance life, they, for so long, they were different worlds. They felt like different worlds. And as I've gotten older, I've recognized that they're very much parallel worlds. And there was a certain point in both, I think I had the realizations at separate times, but they were very parallel realizations. At one point, recognizing that I have to internalize this if I want to actually go deeper in this art or in this practice. So with dance, for so long, it was about getting the technique, getting it into my body, creating a solid foundation, creating the discipline, and getting the instruction and the guidance of my teacher. And in so many ways, the goal of being a dancer or a performer was just to imitate my teacher to the best of my ability. Just see in front of me, what it needs to be, and then just imitate it. And then, and in spiritual life, I think for so many years, it was a similar thing. It was being told what the image of a devotee looks like, what they do, what they eat, how they dress, how they perform these rituals, what to do and what not to do. And I think, like any person, a young person who still hasn't, I wasn't fully able to understand the philosophy, but I was taught it in a way that set me up to internalize it at a later time in life. I used to sometimes say like, oh, it was all so superficial, but now I looking back, I can look back with gratitude and think, oh no, it was teaching me what I was able to grasp at that time, but now I'm able to internalize it more. So in both dance and in spiritual life, there was a time when I realized, okay, it's no longer just the externals. I cannot go further with just the externals. I cannot become a fully present, embodied dancer or devotee unless I start to understand my inner world and I start to not just know what a devotee or a dancer looks like and what they do, but how they think and how they feel. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but both of those things complemented each other in my life at a kind of similar time.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because in dance, right, there's this concept of abhinaya, and you can't really express yourself unless you've really understood the story, you've really understood the characters. And similarly, in bhakti, we have bhava, right? And it's like you can't really understand the pastimes until you've really kind of went into that mood or that mellow. So
Yeah.
what you're saying makes perfect sense because they do complement each other. Um,
Yeah. And
thank
in
you.
both, neither can be done. Neither can be done by imitation.
Right.
Like, and we've been taught that so clearly through our bhakti tradition because there's this importance of not just following the externals or not because sometimes we see people who have that like special something that is really overflowing from their heart and they act a certain way and we just think, oh, that's cool, that's out there, I want to be like that. But there's a danger to imitating the externals without having the internal bhavam. And yeah, so that has taught me about the importance of that in my dance as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Um, yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking about even on stage, like when we're performing or when we're seeing somebody perform, you can kind of pick up when someone is actually involved in that story and when they're just kind of going through the motions. They're like, oh, okay, well, the gopis here, or Krishna's here, or Ram's here, or whatever, you know. And I was wondering, you know, when you're in that moment and you're in that story, and you feel that deep sense of connection, if you felt that kind of reflected in the audience, and what
Mm,
those experiences were like for you.
mm. Yeah, definitely. And at sometimes it can be a little overwhelming,
Hmm.
both in my personal subjective experience
Hmm.
and in the reaction that comes in afterwards. And in those times, I'm really grateful for the knowledge and understanding that it's not me. It's not me creating some amazing visual that has caused emotional or spiritual reaction in someone. I'm devoted to becoming as clear of a channel as I can for Paramatma to come through.
Hmm.
And that, having that background, having that kind of philosophy is so integral to moments like that, because I've had people come up to me after performances and want to want to actually touch my feet or like bow down in front of me, and it's sometimes can be so overwhelming, but I have to, because I'm not necessarily equipped to deal with that. But I'm so grateful for the philosophy that I have been brought up with in bhakti, to understand that, oh, this is not me. This is I'm not taking this person's respect for myself. I'm passing that on to Guru and to Krishna. But and personally, as my own subjective experience, it can be, sometimes there has to be a little bit of a restraint, because it can be a little overwhelming sometimes when the emotion does come through. And I don't say it comes through every time, because a lot of times it is just going through the motions, especially if I don't know the choreography very well, and if I just learned it and I'm performing it. But then there are times when the emotion really comes through, and I do have to practice some restraint, because otherwise I just want to be a sobbing mess on the floor and just take it all in. But that's when the dance training of holding it together. We have this thing in dance called the two different ways of depicting something: the loka dharmi and the natya dharmi. Loka dharmi being very informal, like with regard to human emotions, and then the natya dharmi, which is the aspect of utilizing technique, like keeping the elbows up, keeping the back straight, those things. So we utilize both hand in hand so that it doesn't become too one-sided.
Yeah, balance is definitely key, I think, in all
Yeah.
things. And as you were speaking, you know, I was thinking about how in dance there are instances where, you know, there needs to be like a maturity, or even
Mm-hmm.
maybe not even a spiritual maturity, maybe just like an emotional maturity in order to access some of the more like esoteric pieces
Mm-hmm.
that are there. And so, how do you balance that, and how do you encourage somebody to kind of navigate through that process?
When dealing with some of the more esoteric concepts and pieces,
Yeah.
the way that I would encourage someone is the same thing that I try and implement within myself, is to approach it with humility,
Mhm.
because there are some things that are very difficult to understand. I think this the same can be said about leelas in our own bhakti tradition, that can be very difficult to understand. And initially, the first reaction is to try and analyze them and understand them in the realm of the mind. And these things really will not be understood until it's fully integrated into the realm of the heart. And so my process for dealing with these things is approaching them with humility and with respect and prayer, really, because there are times when I'm depicting a character that I don't feel like I know very well, or that I don't feel like I'm able to fully absorb myself in, or I'm depicting a story. I mean, it's common for dancers, both in Bharatanatyam and in Odissi and other styles of dance, to dance to the Ashtapadis of Jayadeva, the Gita Govindam. So these are really, really high topics, very, very esoteric and incredibly deep. And I personally feel like I'm not ready to perform those pieces. I've started learning them, but in the process of even just learning them, just trying to pray and become humble and understand that in whatever way it comes through, that's the way it's going to come through, and I'm not in control of the outcome, but just to pray for guidance in that.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you. As you were speaking, I was just thinking about what a difference it is being a devotee and being in art, because you have this sense of respect almost, and this like reference, not reference, reverence
Reverence.
towards something that's higher. And
Yeah.
like Bharatanatyam, like you were saying before, is originated from the Vedas. It's originated from spirituality at its core, and it has the power to really connect somebody straight back to Krishna. Krishna dances. He's a god who dances.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so you know, I feel like when you were really young, you got that connection, based off of our conversation. And so I was wondering, how would somebody who, comes into Krishna consciousness, or maybe they already have a certain inclination towards a way to express their true self, how would you encourage them to kind of find that expression?
If they don't already have it before,
Right.
is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I think that the easiest way is to find what moves you, like what you were saying initially, when you have that certain emotional experience when you watch a certain art or when you try a certain art.
Mhm.
And I say follow that. I mean, whatever it is that kind of like gets your heart fluttering and gives you butterflies in your stomach, I would say follow that. And then I would also say that after that initial experience, you might have a lot of experiences that are not that magical. But just like following our path of sadhana bhakti, there's a lot of it has to do with just showing up and becoming regular and becoming disciplined. And it's such a process. I mean, if I know for myself, it's not easy showing up for my sadhana and or showing up for my dance practice, but there is something so transformative about that, and that I'm still learning, um, sometimes the hard way. There's something so transformative about taking that thing which you know to be transformative, and to be inspirational, and to be real, and actually committing to it, I see so often people become interested in an art form and they think, oh yeah, I want to do this as a service, or I want to do this as my expression of devotion.
Mhm.
But after 4 or 5 weeks of trying to practice, it's like, oh, it's too much. I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. But I would say for any classical art form, and I think this it's different from art that's more spontaneous and free and intuitive. I think that's also really wonderful and amazing and transformative too. But for any, because I am speaking for the classical arts, I would say, yeah, stick with it, stick with a practice, and that practice in itself is the process is the goal. I mean, it's the same with bhakti yoga. The process itself is where all the magic is unlocked, just by sticking with the process. So yeah, find what moves you and then move with it, stick with it. That's what I would say.
I like that. Find what moves you and move with it. I
Yeah.
really like that. Yeah. So as you were speaking, I was also thinking about, you know, just how somebody comes into Krishna consciousness and has those experiences. And you were saying, they're like peaks and valleys whenever we're practicing anything, whether it's art or whether it's our devotion. Um, and I was wondering, in your experience, when you're on stage, how do you know, or not even when you're on stage, right? Even when you're practicing, how do you know when you're in the zone? How do you know when you're
Hmm.
feeling that connection to Krishna?
I can't say that it happens very often, but when it does, I forget where I am.
Mhm,
Um, I forget my I forget my surroundings. I kind of forget who I am. It's
mhm,
kind of like entering a dream state. Um, you know, recently I've been putting a lot of more effort and time into my singing practice. I've started singing lessons, and I started last year in May, and it's now February, and this is the way of the classical arts, because I'm studying Hindustani classical singing, and I've only been learning one scale, and it's been however many months, 7, 8 months.
yeah.
Um, but in that in that commitment to just repeating those same scales, and not, because I fought with my mind so much in the beginning, thinking like, shouldn't I be better than this by now? Like, shouldn't I have already started learning something else?
Mhm,
Um, and this applies to dance too, and it applies to sadhana too, I think. Like, shouldn't I be feeling something more, or shouldn't I be like feeling more enthusiastic? Having all these expectations, it's so natural to go into it, with expectation,
mhm,
but something about sitting there and repeating these same scales every day, where I used to think that I needed to wait for some time in the future to in order to have like more variety, in order to have more depth. But the depth was right there in that scale all along.
mhm,
Just singing that same scale every day, now I'm realizing it contains everything in it already. I don't have to go on to some other composition and to some exercises. So actually, just recently, because I've been really like making the promise to myself to show up to my practice, I've been noticing in my singing practice that I've been tapping into a place that I feel like it's it's a type of trance. It's a meditative. It's the zone. It's the type of meditative place that one can get into, and I'm realizing that all this time I thought that it was something outside of what I was doing that needed to improve or that needed to be changed, but it was actually just like being present for what I was doing,
Mm.
um, getting my mind outside of all of that expectation and just getting in, like injecting it into what I was doing in the moment. Um, and so that's when I started feeling that sensation of losing myself in the practice,
Mm.
um, losing my surroundings, and just and actually with my singing practice, I I kind of like I pray to the notes because each note has its presiding deity, and as a devotee I can recognize like all these notes have manifested themselves in order to serve Krishna.
Mm.
So I can offer my respect and my prayers to every single one of the notes, and I can offer it to the trees and to the birds and to the sky. And I think living out here in nature has really helped with that.
Mm.
But yeah, that's what getting into the zone is for me. And I'll admit that with dance it's a little bit harder because most of the time my physical body is just saying, "Why are you doing this?" Depending on what I'm practicing at that moment. Um, but yeah, that I've been feeling it a lot with my music lately, and
Mm.
it's the same experience I have with japa,
Mm.
because instead of sitting down and going like, okay, how much time is it going to take for me to finish this many rounds, and why don't I chant more rounds? I'm like, okay, why am I not focusing? All of those thoughts comes in, but then more and more just thinking, what if I were to be completely present in this round and make not think about the next round, but make not just not think about the next round, not think about the next mantra, not think about the next syllable, just be present within this moment, within this mantra. And that's the actual transformative experience that that happens when I'm present with it. And I'm working on that. I'm like, as I'm speaking, I'm like, yes, Kumari, listen to this advice to be more present in it. It's such a process, as we all know.
I feel like this conversation sometimes, like now, especially after you've said that, I feel like it was meant to happen because I've been hearing that a lot recently as well, And I feel like as devotees, we hear that all the time, like be present in your Krishna consciousness, be present in your japa. But it's when we apply it to our practical life and our practical purposes as well, because every moment is an opportunity to serve. And
Mm,
right, and it's just like when you are present in that moment, then you're serving Krishna because you are in the zone essentially. Um,
so true.
and yeah, when you were speaking about, practice, I'll be real, like whenever I practice dance and I have to do a varnam, I'm out. Like that is for those friends who may not know what a varnam is. It's this elaborate piece that has multiple structured movements as well as passages with stories that you kind of navigate through and express the emotions behind it. I like
And it's often 45 minutes long, like up to
yes,
45 minutes. It's a very long piece.
right, with no breaks. I mean, unless you do like you're sitting down in one of the story pieces or something. But yeah, as you were speaking, it's amazing to me because I think it's so easy to just stay away because something seems so daunting. And I feel like as artists, sometimes we hold this level of perfection with what we want to see that kind of jars us and it prevents us from really taking that leap of faith.
Mm.
Um, as a devotee, I feel like we have a little bit more of a push to take that leap of faith. And I was wondering if you felt that difference as well, compared to how you deal with that. that I don't want to see, it's not pressure. I think it's like self-imposed need to be perfect.
Hmm. Yeah, I I had to really go through a series of ups and downs in order to get to a place where I decided that the most beneficial thing for me in my spiritual life is to be very, very honest with where I'm at. And in order to get to that place, I had to go through the just the tumultuous doubt and rejection. I'm incredibly lucky. I consider myself very fortunate because I was always I was always held by community, I was always held by family, and I never strayed very far
Mhm.
because I've always had an attachment to kirtan and I've always had attachment to dance. But there have been times where I would say in my, I mean, not even very long ago, I'd say like 4 years ago, there was a time where I felt like it was there was too much pressure to do something perfectly to meet these standards, and the expectation was that if I didn't do everything the right way, then I shouldn't be doing it at all. And so I went through that kind of like people sometimes refer to it as the dark night of the soul, just like a lot of deep confusion and bewilderment and even and doubt and like self-doubt and frustration with myself, like why am I not just spontaneously attracted to this? Why am I not just or and on the other hand of it, like why can't I just force myself to do it even when I'm not attracted? So I I felt like I just had to reject it all for a little while. And I remember there was a time where I had to say, I don't know what it even feels like to have faith. I don't think I have any faith. I just like I like being around it because it's nostalgic and it's important. Like it makes me feel good. And I, of course, I think all the time, you know, there was something in the back of my mind and the back of my heart that held me and kept me there. And I think, you know, that's the grace of my family and Paramatma in my heart. But and then there was a certain point when I had to say, Krishna, I I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do it. But if I'm going to actually approach you, I don't want to do it as anyone other than myself. And I don't want to do it dishonestly. So I started to radically accept who I was and where I was at. And that was transformative. That just that one change in perspective, acknowledging that despite my faults, my imperfections, my impurity, that I am still worthy of Krishna's love, of Krishna's unconditional love and his mercy. And that if I pray for it, I will receive it. It doesn't matter how far away I feel like I've fallen from the path. And just doing that genuine soul searching and that genuine prayer, I just feel like a world of kind of like mystical synchronicity and beauty just kind of like opened up in front of me.
Mm.
And then I was moved into a little bit of a phase of like, well, you know, Krishna's on my side, so I can do whatever I want. So there's a little bit of that like, you know, building up this like feeling of like Krishna loves me no matter what, and I just have to be myself. And then Guru steps in, you know, like then the heaviness of like, oh, okay, I do have to put in effort because anything that's important in life requires effort. And I've learned that through my art. And now I'm learning that through my bhakti. Um, now I'm grateful for those experiences of kind of like getting put back into place. Whereas before, I think those things used to make me feel really like afraid and small, and it would draw me away.
Mm-hmm.
I think now it's like empowering, because I'm like, yes, I'm getting Krishna's grace through instructions, and I can take these instructions without making them make me feel small and unworthy. I know that I'm worthy, and I know that Krishna loves me. So these instructions, I can see them more as, oh, this is guiding me. I can take this as something guiding me. And it's the same thing with my dance too, actually. Like I went through a couple of years where I was really afraid of my teacher, my dance guru. I felt like I couldn't talk to her. Like if she messaged me, I felt like I was gonna have a panic attack, because I was so afraid of her judgment and her heaviness. And I realize now it's just because I was being heavy on myself. Like I hadn't fully accepted myself as a dancer. So I wasn't able to interact with her from that place of wholeness. And once I cultivated that within myself, then her instructions and her guidance is now so welcome. And it's the same with receiving instructions in Krishna consciousness. So it's been quite an up and down journey, but now I feel like I'm in this place where I want to learn. I know I have so much to learn, but I know that just being on the path is what counts. And I know that whatever little effort I put in every day counts, and that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing your vulnerability. That's not easy. And thank you. Thank you for being open. And self honesty is so difficult. I struggle with it as a dancer, as a person. Like it's really difficult because you want to present yourself a certain way, and
Yeah.
especially when you're on stage, you feel like you're taking on a persona, and you're like, okay, now I'm stepping into this role, and I feel like, as you were speaking, like you do lose a part of yourself in that performance. And
Mm-hmm.
um, until you really accept who you are, you're not really free to
Mm-hmm.
show people everything. And yeah, everything you were saying was like resonating with me very deeply. And I feel like anyone hearing this who has experienced, not really feeling whole or feeling like they can really give themselves in Krishna consciousness or in their art, could really like feel like this conversation could really impact those persons. If we could take a bit of a shift.
Sure.
And speaking more, along the time, like terms, I'm sorry, it's been a long day, along the lines of dance itself, like the
Mm-hmm.
technicalities and the different
Yeah.
aspects of it. How would you, describe the meanings of the mudras and the meanings of all the movements that you make in dance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's so much depth to all of it. Um, Actually, I was just reading, and I wish I could remember what this was from. Maybe it'll come to me. But I was reading with Sangha here upstate New York a few months ago, and it was a description of the rasa dance, and it was describing how each of the gopis were utilizing different mudras. And it was so beautiful because it was actually naming the mudras as we learned them, pataka, tripataka, ardhapataka. And then it was describing how the presiding deity of each mudra came to witness the rasa dance. And then it was describing how the presiding deities of each ragam, each melody, came and was witnessing the rasa dance, and then they were becoming shy and becoming embarrassed by how beautifully the gopis were singing the ragams, and they were feeling like they personally couldn't sing them because the gopis were singing them with such expertise, and these were the personifications of the ragams themselves. So I love that because it's a reminder to me that you know, we follow a personal philosophy. Everything is personal. Everything is a personality. Everything has a shape, a form, qualities, characteristics. So it's a reminder too that that like behind every movement, there's an unlimited amount of depth.
Mm.
And so my teacher used to always say, like, when you utilize a mudra, for example, if we take Simhamukha, yes, you have the external shape of it, these fingers meeting, and then there's a lot of depth to even just the physical shape. Each of the fingers represent one of the elements, and then energetically, like when we practice yoga, we touch these two fingers. There's all different mudras that help with concentrating the mind, with balancing the energies and balancing the elements within the body. So even just physically, you could say like, okay, this takes on a certain energetic form just by touching these fingers together. But then symbolically, this is a deer typically, or a cow, or a dog, some kind of mammal. But that's just the shape of the hand symbolically, and how you depict it with your body language and with your eyes and with the quickness or slowness of your breath and with the movement and the emotion behind it is what's actually going to bring out the meaning. So I always like to, whenever I teach workshops and I'm teaching mudras, I like to show the how one mudra itself is not complete. Just the hand gesture is not complete, but it has to be paired with the bhavam, the emotion, the feeling. So like if this was a cow, you know, you might show it like this, like walking slowly with the arch in the back, you know, the show the cow looking up at Krishna, just like this cow here. Oh, that's so cute. I didn't even think of that, and then I saw that. I remember that cow was there. But if this was a deer, how does the deer move about? So the deer is constantly like frantically looking around for the predator, right? And jumping. So it's the same exact mudra, but how it's depicted, it involves so much more. So yeah, I guess to answer that, I would just say like there's so much unlimited depth to it all that it's just fascinating, and it's all encompassing, and there's no limit to how much somebody could dive into the meaning of one mudra. And some of it is recorded in books, you know, a lot of it's in the Natya Shastra, a lot of it's been passed down from teachers, but there's so much more that's just like out here in the spiritual realm that we don't even have access to yet, maybe someday. But hopefully I'll get there one day and download that information.
If you do, you know, just drop it in like a Dropbox
Yeah.
or something.
I'll do some recordings and send them out
Right,
in
yeah.
secret.
Covert recordings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I had no idea, honestly, about like the different different personifications of the mudras themselves. Like
Yeah.
the ragas, I've heard of that before, but the mood that's so beautiful to me because everything is in service. Like,
Yes. Yeah. It describes um it describes the personification of the mudra, and then like what color they are and what vehicle they ride on, like who's their vahana, what
mhm,
planet they live on. It's just like unlimited. It's so incredible. It's fascinating.
wow, that is really cool. Um, yeah, if you know, if you can you share that with me at a later time? Um,
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna find out what book I was reading that in. I'll message my friend who I was reading with. And yeah, as dancers, because my friend who I was reading with, she's also a dancer, and we were getting so excited. We're like, oh, this like anything that brings the two worlds together, the world of bhakti and of dance. Because the way that dance has been presented to a lot of us, uh, over the years, in so many ways, it's been kind of divorced from the idea of spirituality. So, like the things that bring it back together for us as devotees, like wholeness. It feels really good.
yeah, for sure. That actually kind of brings me into my next question as well is as you were saying, you know, there is such a like a disconnect in the recent past with what Bharatanatyam or dance or music, whatever expression is, and spirituality. And there are a lot of different paths, and a lot of them are very impersonal. You know, just being very real, they're very impersonal. And so, as a devotee, in this art form as someone who you've dedicated your life to learning this art form and to studying it, how do you navigate these impersonalist texts in dance or impersonalist teachings even?
Yeah. Um, Most of the time when it comes up, even though I have a desire and a feeling like I need to say something, like in order to adjust the perspective, a lot of the times what actually needs to happen within me is just a deeper meditation on the personal aspects. Because there have been times when even if I try and say something, it it doesn't get met very well, and I realize that I don't actually have the tools in my toolbox to like argue or to make a point or to change anyone's mind. I
Mm,
just end up, because sometimes people, if they approach things very much from the Yanni perspective, they'll just like throw out a bunch of things at me, and I'm just like, oh, I don't know, okay, I just want to love Krishna. So I take it as an opportunity really to increase my own reflection.
mm,
My response to it is to increase my own reflection within myself on the personal aspects,
mhm,
with hopes that one day I can just keep nurturing that within myself, and that one day as it matures, I can share that
mhm,
as even just through my own realizations or through my performing, um, not necessarily that that like specific goal in mind,
mhm,
but just by really internalizing my reflecting on Srila Prabhupada's teachings and the teachings of the Vaishnavas, and to try and have that, yeah, mature within myself. I tend to just have to just, okay, you know, let that go, and then go, let me self-reflect, and let me let me just keep watering my own seed, because I do feel like one day I want to be able to share. I don't think that I'm at that level of maturity yet to be able to like really do that impactfully, but
mhm.
I kind of feel like that's the way that my art is going. Is, I mean, I hope that is, because ultimately I want to be able to utilize it in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. And that's what, you know, from the example of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta, our whole disciplic succession we've been taught over and over and over again that this this personal approach
Mm,
to spirituality is
yeah.
the absolute truth, and it's the deepest and it's the highest.
Mm,
So if I truly want to use my art as a service to Mahaprabhu's mission, I have to internalize that within myself. So
yeah.
that's the goal. That's the dream.
Yeah. That's yeah. That's really, thank you. I think internalizing is something that it's so easy to, I guess, to just say it, but when you actively practice it, and when you were sharing it just now, um, that practice is a whole other story. It's a completely different ball game. And yeah, and if anybody has any questions, if anybody would like to ask, feel free. You can come off mute, or you could type it in the chat if you would like for us to read it. Um, Either way, if anybody has any questions.
I have a comment. There's this, she's talking about practice and spontaneity, coming to a point of spontaneity. We have the concept of Vaidhi, rules and regulations, techniques, and Raganuga, spontaneous. And it seems that it's a slow process, but we have to start off with regulations and rules and teachings and following teachers. I just wanted to relay us in some of the Puranas. It describes how the great Narada Muni was not always a perfect musician, and he once had a kind of an envy of a person named Tumburu, who was a very great celestial musician, and Narada became very fixated on following learning to be a perfect musician, and he wanted to even be better than this Tumburu. So it describes how for thousands of years, he approached various teachers and did austerities. And then he finally became, and in the process, it's described one time he was playing his music and the musical notes were kind of injured. He wasn't perfect yet as a musician, but he finally became very great, and he ended up playing with his idol, this Tumburu, and in various Puranas describes how they play music in kirtan for Krishna's pleasure together. And I just wanted to ask, there's a kind of envy that's not bad, where we appreciate someone's expertise or embodiment of the spirit of something, and there's a kind of envy that is bad. So I was just wondering if Kumari could discuss how a pure appreciation can be developed, in trying to, if we see someone that's a better devotee than us or a better dancer or better in some way, how we can use that in a positive way to improve ourselves, even though we may never be the same. In fact, we can never be the same as everyone else anyway, anyone else. So maybe she could comment on that.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing, Prabhu. Um, gosh, I mean, I I find for myself that I I sometimes get intimidated by devotees and by their ability to be incredibly disciplined and be incredibly strict. And I notice it and I kind of see myself shrinking away from it. I mean, I'll just share a personal experience with my own father, who I revere and look up to so much. But he's incredibly strict. His sadhana is just incredible. He hasn't skipped one day of chanting 16 rounds since the day he got initiated, which was more than 40 years ago now. And I sometimes when I'm around that, like the fire of it feels like it could burn me. Like it feels intimidating. And because I think of myself and all the qualities that I don't like in myself and how I don't have that. And then recently he came and stayed with me and I was thinking, you know, I I can choose to be inspired by his sadhana and I can choose to appreciate it. And by doing so, I'm putting myself in a better position to actually absorb that, and to actually like receive his association, because I think energetically I was removing myself from his association by being intimidated by it, or just thinking like, oh, he's so strict, his standards are so high. I have to like I have to I have to protect my false ego because I feel scared of it and it's just too much. But yeah, I I feel like accepting myself for who I am and accepting that I am a conditioned soul and accepting that I'm very much going through this human experience with all the modes of nature, and I'm very much in it, and accepting that and realizing it about myself and noticing like, okay, I'm fallible, I'm not perfect, and then seeing, wow, I can look at him and I can appreciate and I can be inspired by that. And and now I feel much more like when he's chanting, I think, wow, I can sit here and listen to him chanting, because I know he's not judging me for not, having been chanting 16 rounds for years and years and years. He loves me and he genuinely wants to bless me in my pursuit of sadhana and devotional life. So when I started thinking, oh, I can listen to his chanting and I can appreciate it and I can become inspired by it, and then in that way I'm getting his blessings. So that's my own personal anecdote. I feel kind of silly answering questions from devotees who are much senior than myself, but that was just what came to mind. Thank you, Prabhu, for that.
Thank you.
And just to add on, thank you for answering that question, because I feel like even as a performers in general, like we have this sense of like competing with one another, and I feel like even as people sometimes we feel like the sense of like one-upsmanship almost, and having that understanding of, I guess, one, self honesty, like you were saying, and also just understanding that you are enough and you are worthy of something that's so great, like love. That kind of just opens up the door to expressing yourself as you are, with no other point of contact, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Like having self-esteem so high that you become humble,
Right.
that you can actually become humble and then be receptive, because humility is the prerequisite for knowledge. So yeah, it's it involves having to let go of that idea of perfection, but then there's so much sweetness in like being honest with oneself, like you said, becoming receptive.
Yeah. And it almost seems like an oxymoron, right? Like you have to have high
Yeah,
esteem to be humble, but
yeah,
true.
it is because either if you're self-obsessed or if you're self-loathing, I heard someone say this once, if you're self-obsessed or you're self-loathing, um, both of them are self-absorbed. Humility is coming from the place of honesty and okay, this is where I am, and then yeah, coming from that place and then actually being able to be not self-absorbed and become receptive to others' guidance and inspiration.
Yeah, thank you. Um, does anybody else have any other questions? You can also type it out in the chat as well. Last time I did this thing of like talking too much when people were trying to answer questions, so I'm just gonna stop talking.
No worries.
I was hoping we would see a short clip of your dancing, but I don't know if that would be technically arrangeable.
Ooh, I don't know how we would do that. Um, well, I mean, I can do a little bit of something live, just like 1 minute.
That would be
Okay,
wonderful.
okay. I'll share something that I'm learning right now, actually, which is this beautiful piece. So, Sanchari Mataji, I didn't know that you're a dancer as well. That's exciting to hear. But so maybe you're probably familiar with this. It's a Devaranama composed by poet Purandara Dasa in Canada, and it's Jagado Dharana. Have you learned it?
I love that song. Oh, okay. All right.
It's so beautiful, and it's actually really special because I've been wanting to learn it for a very very long time, and
Mhm.
then I recently told my teacher that I want to start classes again, and she said, okay, let's start with Jagado Dharana. So I'll just give a little description of what the song is. It's the poet Purandara Dasa is saying he's describing how inconceivably fortunate Mother Yashoda is, because the Lord of the entire three worlds, he who is omnipotent, omnipresent, the smaller than the smallest, bigger than the biggest, and he is her baby son. He is her child, and how incredible that is. And I just love that, because the whole idea of it just encapsulates this philosophy of bhakti so beautifully, that he who is almighty, all powerful, the creator of everything, he he wants to be in that position of being the son, the child of Mother Yashoda. So I'll just do a couple lines of it. Let me just give myself a little space. My teacher's singing. the entire world. He is the Lord of the entire creation. And he's just a tiny baby. Not a very good recording. But then the song goes on to, and my teacher is also such a genius with her creative abilities, but she showing each of the Dasavataram, showing Matsya, like huge Matsya, and that is Krishna. And then showing Mother Yashoda going, look at the little fish, like as if she's showing him a fish for the first time, as if he's never seen a fish before. And then Kurma, who carries the entire Mount Meru on his back. And then Mother Yashoda takes him and she puts him on her back. The Lord is the entire universe, and she carries him. Or as Vamana, he, with his 3 steps, he covered the entire universe, upper and lower planetary systems. And then as Yashoda's son, she teaches him how to walk, take his first step, second step. It's so, so beautiful. But songs like that especially, it becomes very easy to enter that mood of awe and reverence, but also just so much sweetness.
That was beautiful. Yeah, that song, like, I have like a connection with that song as well, in the sense that I agree. It's like it's so sweet. Like every word of it is just like filled with just like love. And maybe it's a mother thing, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, I used to practice my abhinaya with that song. I would just like play, if I was stressed, I was doing some work, I'd just play that song. I'd be like, you know what, we gotta take a break. We gotta go back.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for that demonstration. And it brings, I mean, it's already 8:13.
Hello?
Your guru is able to encapsulate that relationship, and showing like the philosophy as well as just the sweetness of who Krishna is, or what that relationship is. And I was wondering, as you were going through and you were you're choreographing pieces and you're kind of bringing to light these things, what's your thought process as you are choreographing?
When I'm choreographing,
Yeah.
Choreography is not something that comes super easily to me, to be honest. What I do really like doing is improvising because I feel like in that I get the opportunity to just kind of like see what happens, see what comes. I do a lot of, or I used to, back when temple gatherings were a thing, a lot of performances to bhajans on a festival or something. So usually, and this would be my approach to choreography as well, is to just listen to the music and really just see what comes out of it, see what flows, and then look at that and then go, oh, okay, I like this, or that worked, or that didn't work. So much of it is just kind of like taking myself out of it and just seeing what comes through. Yeah. But I don't choreograph nearly as much as my guru does, and her choreography is so beautiful, so I like to learn from her.
does choreograph mean you come up with an original sequence of moves and things? So
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
it's a creative process.
Yeah, yeah. My teacher is always encouraging me to choreograph more, and I do think that in the future it's something I'd like to go into in more depth, and I do here and there now.
Yeah, I see some of your things on Instagram sometimes, and when I'm on there, and I like your choreography. I'll be very
Thank
honest.
you.
I really
Oh,
like how you kind of meld the both worlds together sometimes too when you're doing some of the more modern styles in with the classical training, and how you kind of bridge it so it
yeah.
becomes almost more accessible, to everyone who's
Mm,
watching it.
thank you. Yeah, all of those things are improvised. What you're referring to,
Mhm.
I like to just I really enjoy flowing with movement. I don't enjoy having to remember what it was and do it the same again, or having to write it down or figure it out. So
Right.
either I like to just learn from someone or I like to improvise. But yeah, I think that I someday I'll bridge the gap between those two things, like and actually be able to choreograph things and put it on paper. Because I don't teach, also because I don't have students, I haven't had much need to like put together pieces so much. But thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I think it's starting to get to that point of night where I'm bringing out my really bad British accent.
I like it.
But, but if nobody else has any other questions, I'd like to say personally, and also as part of our Simply Wonderful Fridays program, thank you so much for
Thank
joining us,
you.
Kumari. This conversation has been very enlightening with this realm of dance and art and Krishna consciousness. And I feel like your personal journey with the dance and with bhakti is something that resonates with so many people. And thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me. And thank you, um, all of you who are here. I wish I could have seen your faces, but thank you. Yeah,
My,
this is really nice.
my camera doesn't work, so I'm sorry.
Oh, you're forgiven, Prabhu. Thank you again. I really appreciate this. It's nice time spending with all of you.
So we hope someday when the pandemic is over, you do some traveling and come through Houston and dance at
I
our
hope so
temple.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so too. Actually, there's been a few attempts to come out to Houston that for some reason didn't pan out. I was going to perform at the temple opening, but I think it's being saved for sometime in the future.
Yeah, that's nice.
Thank you, Boo.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kumari. That was that was a real treat just seeing you for demonstrate for that 1 minute. Yeah, really looking forward to seeing it live one day. And thanks for joining us. It was a really wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the space to be myself.
Anytime. Yeah. And would love to, we look forward to doing it again, we'd love to stay in touch and, wish you all the best with the new place. Congratulations with the move.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well,
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Be safe.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Yeti.
Nice to meet you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Nice to meet you. Hari Hari.